Night is a new comedy crime film directed by John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein, and this movie is about a group of couples that get together on Friday nights. They're great friends and they like to play game nights, where they play like Scrabble or charades, Pictionary, all these different games because they're so competitive with each other, and that's why they bond so much on these fun nights. Our main couple is led by Max and Annie, played by Jason Bateman and Rachel Mcadams, who have actually fallen in love through these game nights. They love being competitive with each other and everyone else, and everything's going great for them until one night Brooks, played by Chandler, who is Jason Bateman's older brother, shows up and is like, hey, this is a lot of fun, like, this is great, but because I'm rich and more successful than you, Jason Bateman, I'm gonna up the ante a little bit for game night. And so he decides to throw a murder mystery party, where basically someone is being taken and it's up to them to find out who it is to win the ultimate prize. And as the night goes on, our characters find out that maybe this isn't going the way that Brooks originally intended. And I won't say anything else about the plot just in case you haven't seen the trailer. Based on pure concept alone, I was actually quite interested in this, because when you read the concept, a game night with this murder mystery game that goes wrong in certain ways, if I had just heard that concept and didn't see the trailer, I would have been very interested in this film. However, that wasn't my first introduction to this film. My first introduction to this film was that it's being directed by John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein, who wrote Horrible Bosses, which I love. Then they did Incredible Burt Wonderstone, which is bad, and then they wrote Clouded with a Chance of Meatballs 2, which is not as good as the first movie. Then they moved on to direct Vacation, which is one of the worst R-rated comedies out there, if you ask me. Sure, they had Spider-Man Homecoming next in their filmography, but that was like a writing room of like several people, and they were like the two people in it, and it's not like they directed the movie either. And sure, this movie's not written by them, but it's directed by them, and they did Vacation last, so I did not go into this film with the highest of hopes. That being said, I walked out of this film fairly surprised that these two are the same guys who directed Vacation. This movie is considerably much better. For one thing, their direction actually improves. This movie doesn't really feel like a generic kind of comedy film, but it also doesn't really feel like a flashy one, like in-your-face stuff. This movie actually does have some pretty good direction in it, from the cinematography, the way they capture the nighttime, also certain like establishing shots that they have. They did it in a way where it looked like a board game, and like the cars and like the buildings were like these board game pieces, which I thought was very incredible. Like, I was just watching this comedy and I was like, wow, they were actually able to get some really creative shots in this film. Not only did they just handle the direction well in general, but there are certain action sequences that take place that, direction-wise, they're so good. And once again, compare it to Vacation, which had a few action scenes, like if I remember correctly, this movie's much better than that. It's way more creative the way they move the camera, like with one car chase they had where sometimes it'll be attached to the car and then the camera will like follow the car but then move when it makes a move. Like, it's very cool stuff. And there's one chase scene in this mansion, one take. Like, they do it in a one-take shot, and it just involves these characters running around, going through this big mansion trying to avoid these people, and it's so good. It's, like, so well done. Like, that's another thing that really surprised me about the direction, and I'm so glad that these two actually got better at that, because if they just did another generic directed film like Vacation, then this movie probably would not have been as good as it was. It's also their direction that I think really makes the premise of this film works, because on paper alone, these characters could have been done one of two ways. It could have been really good, or it could have been irritating and annoying based on the actors you picked or the way they wrote them. However, I think the directors knew how to handle this source material, and I also think that the cast knew how to handle these characters as well. These guys, although on paper could come across as really conceited jerks, they actually are very likable and funny while you're watching this film. When they're all in the same scenes together, they feel like true friends. The way they talk to each other, made jokes about each other, it felt like actual friendship stuff. And it didn't really come across as forced kind of just comedy like, hey, it's in your face and we're so funny because we just said something outrageous. This movie does have humor that normal people would not say, but I think it's handled in a much better way. It feels realistic when it comes to the actors portraying these characters. And although there are main stars, Jason Bateman and Rachel Mcadams, everyone in the cast of Friends has at least one or two moments to like actually stand out and tell a joke that really killed. Like, you know when you're watching a comedy in like a movie theater and like say there's like 5 of you and like certain jokes will start and maybe like 4 of you laugh at one point but one guy doesn't, maybe 3 of you laugh at another moment and 2 people don't laugh. This movie has a couple moments where each character has at least 1 or 2 moments where everyone in my theater at least were laughing in unison. Everyone has a chance to shine so that they don't come across as background characters to Jason Bateman and Rachel McAdams. Like Billy Magnuson's character of Ryan, for example. He could have just come across as this annoying jerk who's really dumb, but he's trying to play it up like, hey, I'm smart, guys, and trying to fit in, but it doesn't really work. Billy Magnuson, I thought, really pulled off this dumb guy performance very well, because where most movies kind of overdo it, like, for example, Ghostbusters with Kevin, played by Chris Hemsworth, that movie makes it seem like Kevin is so dumb that he should have died like 10 years ago or something, even longer than that. But in this movie, you see the dumb guy, and it's like, yeah, you're functional, obviously, it's just you're not the brightest bulb in the bunch. And even Kyle Chandler, who also could have just come across as the annoying older brother who's richer, so he's gonna act like he's better than everyone, I think Kyle Chandler actually nailed it with his performance. It was the perfect kind of rich guy who's kind of oblivious to how much of a douche he's kind of acting with certain things that he says. And although he does come across as that way, he's still like a fun presence to have. Like performance-wise, he is very funny here. And it also helps that Jason Bateman is bringing his own sense of humor to the film, because you can essentially say that this is another Jason Bateman role. That's a famous thing to say, is that Jason Bateman plays like the same character in like almost every film. That is sort of true, but usually it comes down to how he pulls it off. And I think here, like he does multiple other times, he pulls it off very well. He has this great, just sarcastic kind of dry sense of humor where he'll just like drop this line out there and it just kills because it's him saying it. Only really he can pull it off. That's why I think like Jason Bateman is one of the best like leading comedic mans that we have out there right now. Because he is more of a sarcastic kind of dry sense of humor guy, but the way he says it just really stands out. And he makes it just so likable at the same time. There are some people that can make that really annoying, but Jason Bateman, he knows how to make that likable, and I really love that. Also, what I really loved is Rachel McAdams playing off of him. She was excellent in this film. Rachel McAdams was on fire. She honestly, in some ways, stole the show from Jason Bateman, who is, I guess you could say, the main character. She's also the main character, but Jason Bateman is the one they're kind of focusing on more. I thought Rachel McAdams kind of stole this movie. She is so good here. She knows how to play off of Jason Bateman's kind of sense of humor very well, the way they interact. They feel like an actual couple with history with each other. She also knows how to play up the comedy, like, to a great extent. Like, she has some really funny moments in this movie, especially certain things that happen near the end of the film that had me cracking up so hard. And there's a chemistry that Jason Bateman and Rachel McAdams have together that, played by anyone else, would not have worked. So thank God they got these two together because they are so good. However, I really loved Rachel McAdams in this film. There is an argument to be made, though, that Jesse Plemons steals this film. And although I think Rachel McAdams stole the movie, I can't really argue against anyone saying that about Jesse Plemons. He was hysterical in this movie. His character is just this like socially awkward creep next door who is this cop, and he holds this dog with him, and the way they film him too, like with like these slow dollies like zooming in while he's just holding this dog and like talking in like this really low voice about something really dramatic, and just keeping like that straight face the whole time. Like he's coming across as really creepy, but in the funniest way possible. Like the way he just says stuff like really seriously had me cracking up, but also just kind of going like, oh my god, he's such a creep. And where they take his character as the film progresses, I really enjoyed that. Once again, he's not really a side character who's just kind of there because, hey, it's funny because it's an exaggerated stereotype. His character is there for a purpose that I really enjoyed. So the characters were really enjoyable to watch as the film progresses. The plot itself was unique enough to have me hooked and have me interested as it progressed. The direction was also very good, with good cinematography and good action moments that actually got thrilling. And also the score is done by Cliff Martinez, who, in case you don't know, my favorite score of his, Drive, he did that. And I was just sitting there like in the theater like, I wonder who did the score, because this is much better than most comedy films out there, because certain comedy films don't really succeed when it comes to scores. And then as the credits were rolling, it said Cliff Martinez, and I was like, oh my god, Drive? And I was like, that actually does explain a lot. The score is very good. It's actually I'm not kidding about that. Like, it's a very good comedy score. Thanks, Cliff Martinez. I do have a couple issues with this film. This movie kind of relies a little bit too much on celebrity references for jokes, and for the most part, it makes sense because a lot of the stuff they play is like trivia stuff, and also there's a couple jokes that had me laughing, but there are certain moments where it just kind of got old, and I was like, alright, can we just stop with the celebrities for a bit, especially because of one subplot involving Kevin and Michelle, these two characters who are very funny and are very funny together, but they have a little subplot involving a reference to a celebrity. Won't spoil it, but as it kind of progressed and seeing where it ended, I enjoyed it because it was a good laugh, but when you look at just the whole film, it doesn't really fit in. So although I enjoyed it, like, it doesn't have any place in the plot that's at hand here. Also, there's a couple obvious exposition moments near the beginning that really got on my nerves just as far as a writing standpoint. Also, when the movie gets to the third act, it kind of suffers through some other comedy crime stuff that we've had before. What I mean by that is that this movie kind of reveals something at the beginning of the third act where I was like, oh man, that's actually a really unique way to end this film, because other movies would just keep it going on for so much longer, probably end it with an action scene. But it looks like this movie's gonna end it on a really clever note that actually is really funny too. But then the movie, it was like it heard my mind, like it was reading my mind as I was thinking that in the theater, and the movie was like, but hey, that's not all, here's this! And I was just kind of there like, oh, okay. And it's not that I hated that or anything, but it just definitely came across as more the movie was trying to show off at that point as far as how clever they could be, but it wasn't that clever because they kind of already had a clever ending with the thing they had before, but they kept it going. I won't spoil it, but they keep it going, and that's the thing that kind of killed it a little bit. But even then, it was still consistent with the laughs for me. It still had some good direction going on, good comedy with the good characters that I was enjoying watching, and overall, I had a surprisingly good time with Game Night. I did not expect this film to be like a surprise because it's Jonathan Goldstein and John Francis Daley who did Vacation, which I hated, but then they did this, which is a film that I really enjoyed. I'm gonna give Game Night a B+. As a comedy, it is so good. It's very funny, it's got great characters that, if done wrong, could have been very aggravating, but they actually were able to pull it off with the great cast that they have. Jason Bateman and Rachel McAdams, they're great together. And Jesse Plemons, of course, kind of steals this movie in general. His character is a standout for sure. This movie has a couple flaws that are kind of typical with a lot of other comedy films, but a lot of this film is executed so well that I wasn't really, like, hating on it that much. I actually really enjoyed this film much more than I thought I would. I honestly would recommend you check this film out. But if you've seen Game Night already, leave in the comments below what you thought of it, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.